chair. Mr. Kennedy is in his weekend. I'll turn it up. Can you hear now? Mr. Kennedy is in his 5th term as treasurer. Before that, he served as Secretary of the Department of Revenue, Special Counsel to Governor Buddy Roemer, and Secretary of Governor Roemer's cabinet. He's been a frequent guest at Press Club, and we'll give him this fall when we host our forums for the candidates for elected office, including the U.S. Senate seat that David Bitter is vacating. But today he's going to talk about the state budget. Just a reminder that only members of the press and the Press Club can ask questions, and we ask that you raise your hand to ask a question. And Mr. Kennedy, we ask that you repeat the question for the sake of the cameras. Okay? Thank you.
Get comfortable, folks. What I'd like to do today is spend a few minutes talking to you about our budget. By our budget, I mean our budget beginning July 1 in the context of the taxes and fees that were raised, and also in the context of the state of current state of our economy in Louisiana, and try to give you a little perspective, at least from my point of view. I'm going to have to get down a little bit in the weeds on the budget. We're still trying to figure it out. A lot of my numbers come from the House Fiscal Division. When I talk about the budget today, I'm going to talk about state dollars, and I'm going to talk about federal dollars. I'm not going to talk about interagency transfer, because that's double counting. I understand the reason for it, but it just confuses things. I'm not talking about the judicial budget. I'm not talking about the legislature's budget. I'm not going to talk about the ancillary appropriations bill, where we fund risk management, Office of Group Benefits, the revolving loan funds for clean water. I think that all just that's money that's spent, but it kind of clouds the issue. I'm talking about the operating budget for the executive branch, state dollars, federal dollars. And when I talk about state dollars, I'm going to talk about general fund money, but I also am going to include in that number self-generated fees, and I'm going to include in that number statutory dedications. So those are the terms. If you look at our budget beginning July 1 in a few days, it includes state money, state funds of $14.08 billion as best we can tell. Now once again, that includes the general fund, self-generated fees, and statutory dedications, $14.08 billion. Federal money of approximately $11.89 billion. It comes out to $25.97 billion. Let's call it $26 billion. And to make it simple, next year in a few days, next year begins, we'll have $14 billion worth of state money and about $12 billion worth of federal money for about $26 billion. Let me put that in context. The current budget, this fiscal year, which ends in a few days, has about $13.3 billion in state money and about $9.7 billion in federal money, for a total of roughly $23 billion. So the budget beginning on July 1 is going to be $26 billion. Once again, all in state and federal. The current budget is $23 billion. Some of that extra money is attributable to the Medicaid expansion program and the federal monies that it attracted. Because of that, and because of the fact we have joined the Medicaid portion of the Affordable Care Act, and it kind of skews the numbers, I want to talk just about state money so we can see where we are. Recall I just said next year we will have $14 billion worth of state money. Let's put that in context. That's the most money we have had and will have since the boom days after Katrina. I only went back as far as 2008. We've got $14 billion starting July 1. In 2008, we had $13.3. In 2009, $13.2 billion. In 10, $10.7. Then we jumped to 11.5. Then 12. Then 12.6. Then 12.9. Then 13.1. Then 13.3 last year. And today, $14 billion. I'm going to use as the benchmark year the same year that the Legislative Fiscal Office uses, and that's fiscal year 2010, and here's why. You know what happened after Katrina? Unexpectedly, our economy boomed through the influx of American taxpayer money. Our revenues at the state level started going up dramatically. Then we hit the recession of 2008. We're not immune from a national recession. We started going down. Our revenues started picking back up with both the storm money and the recession behind us in 2010. In 2010, we had $10.7 billion in state money. Today, we have $14 billion. That is a 31% increase in state money in the last 6 years. Let's talk about Medicaid. Medicaid's easily our biggest expenditure. It's 40% of our budget and climbing with the expansion. Once again, I'm going to give you numbers before the expansion because we don't know how many people we're going to add to the expansion. I think the administration has predicted 350 to 400,000. If we have the experience that other states have had, we will add more than that. But the numbers I'm about to give you are without Medicaid expansion. In 2008, our Medicaid budget was $5.8 billion. That's federal and state. Today, it's roughly $8.3 billion. That's a 43% increase since 2005. Let's talk the state portion of Medicaid. In 2008, out of the general fund, we were contributing $2.1 billion out of the general fund for Medicaid. Today, it's closer to $3.3 billion. That is a 58% increase. If you do the math, it's about 7.3% a year. We cannot sustain that kind of growth. And you say, well, but what about medical inflation? Actually, after the recession of 2008, medical inflation went way down. 3 to 4% nationally increase in healthcare costs was considered high. We have clipped along at about 7.3%. There's simply no way, unless we want to stop funding universities and roads and public schools and general government, to sustain the kind of spending that we have had in Medicaid, in my judgment. So to kind of sum up, next year we'll have a $26 billion budget. That's $3 billion more than this year. Next year we will have $14 billion of state money to spend. That is the most money that we have had since the boom days after Katrina. That is about a 31% increase in state money, not federal, in state money over the past 6 years. All right, where did all this money come from? Well, I think you know the answer to that. Taxes and fees. In the last 365 days, and let me tell you why I'm including the last 365 days. It became clear to me in last year's regular session that as a matter of policy, our legislature had decided to start raising taxes. Now, I know there was a debate about whether they really did, and there was the SAVE program and all of that. which was a gimmick. But the truth of the matter is that the legislature decided as a matter of policy last spring to start raising taxes. And they raised roughly about $800 million. If you add that to the taxes and fees raised this year, under the former taxes were raised under Governor Edwards, the current taxes are under Governor General, current taxes are raised under Governor Edwards, even though I hasten to add, neither one of them gets to vote on the bill in the legislature. It's ultimately a decision for the legislature. We're looking at about $2.4 billion. Now, I don't want to bore you, but I think it is instructive. I made a list. It might not be complete, but this is what I think they actually raised, and I just want to go through it very, very quickly. The state raised corporation income taxes, corporation franchise taxes, sales taxes on consumers, cigarette taxes, liquor taxes, sales taxes on purchases of machinery and equipment. State raised inventory taxes, personal income capital gains taxes. They reduced the citizens' property insurance credit, which will raise personal income taxes. State raised telephone taxes, taxes on short-term home or apartment rentals, insurance premium taxes, reduced vendor compensation, reduced interest on taxpayer overpayments, business utility taxes, reduced the tax credits for taxes paid to other states, reduced the 3-year carryback option for the net operating losses deduction, reduced the solar tax credit, reduced the severance tax exemption for horizontal wells, reduced the enterprise zone tax credits. That's just the taxes. Now the fees. We're still going through to see which of these passed, but I think most of them did. We will have new fees or fee increases on the state courts, the Office of Motor Vehicles, cemeteries, fishing guides, drones, pipeline operators, clemency investigators, architects, medical records, notaries, oyster farmers, court reporters, crabbers, hunters, school bus drivers, insurance consultants, electric vehicle owners, oil companies, learner drilling permits, contractors, birth certificates, death certificates, towing companies, and I understand they increased the price on veterans' funerals, food vendors, beverage vendors, and that doesn't include the massive fee tax packages which came out of DHH and DEQ and the Department of Agriculture. It's breathtaking. I mean, it's breathtaking. That is the largest tax increase in the last 365 days in Louisiana history. And at the end, the proponents of more taxes wanted more. Many have said it's not enough. They wanted to increase further personal income taxes. Let me tell you the conclusions that I think you can draw from. Well, let me mention one other thing, because this is important. But you can't just look at budget and spending and taxes in a vacuum. You've got to look at them in the context of your economy. Because there are two critical questions here. One of the critical questions that seemed to dominate discussion at this Capitol was, how much money do we have to spend? How much money does state government have to spend? But that money that they spend doesn't just fall from heaven. We thank heaven for it, but it comes from someplace. It's called taxpayers. So another critical question is, well, how much money do the people of Louisiana have to contribute? We have the third highest unemployment rate right now in America, and rising. We're a point below Illinois. Number one is Alaska. Our unemployment rate is 6.3%. The U.S. average is 5.5%. And that 6.3% unemployment rate really masks the real problem. Go down to St. Mary Parish, 9.2%. Go down to Iberia Parish, 9.1%. Our gross domestic product as a state every year is anywhere from $220 to $240 billion. That's the total amount of goods and services we produce. 40% of that, directly or indirectly, is related to oil and gas. oil and gas exploration, oil field services, maritime, caterers that feed our workers offshore, 40%. And it's not in a downturn. It's not in a recession. It is in a depression. When you couple that with the fact that, take timber production. Timber is hugely important in this state, especially in North Louisiana. It has never recovered since the recession of 2008. It's getting better, but it's not even close to getting well. In March, we had 5,000 homes flood in Louisiana. Most of those people didn't have flood insurance. My point is, this is not a strong economy. And taking a slice, when government comes in and takes a bigger slice out of a healthy economy, is worth that. But when it comes in as the state has done and takes a bigger slice out of a weak economy, that's another thing altogether. It makes the situation worse. I think that if you want to try to reach conclusions from this, what I would conclude from it is this. We like to talk about winners and losers at the Capitol. There were two approaches to solving the problem that we have. One approach was to raise taxes. Obviously, another approach was to reduce spending. There were some purists in both camps. There were some policymakers who said, I will not consider cutting any spending, and there were others who said, I will not consider not raising any taxes. And then of course, there were many who did a little bit of both. I think that it is clear that the raise taxes movement won. And of course, the quarterback was Governor Edwards. And I read everybody's, the pundits, and while I respect everybody's opinion, I think you have to conclude that in terms of a winner getting what he wants, Governor Edwards won these last 3 sessions. Unfortunately, in my opinion, the Louisiana taxpayer lost. And here's why I say that. Before they raised $2.4 billion worth of new taxes and fees, over the past 10 years, our economy had grown 25%. State government had grown 44%. That's before the tax increases. Before they raised the taxes and fees, Louisiana ranked, based on the most recent U.S. Census Bureau data, Louisiana ranked #1 in per capita spending, in state and local per capita spending. Why do I include state and local? Because some states deliver a service or a product at the state level, others at the federal level, or rather others at the local level. So to be fair, to compare apples to apples and states to states, you have to include state and local spending. Before these tax increases, we were #1 in the South in state and local spending per capita. If you just look at state spending, if you don't want to couple state and local, then according to the Kaiser Family Foundation, once again, before $2.4 billion in new taxes and fees, Louisiana was spending 43% more capita than Texas and 71% more capita than Florida. Now, that's just a fact. That tells me we had a spending problem, not a revenue problem. Nonetheless, the governor won the day. They raised $2.4 billion worth of new taxes and fees. The largest tax increase in the history of this state. A breathtaking amount. We now have more state money, $14 billion, than we have had in a decade. The budget is $3 billion more beginning July 1 than it is today. And that's just a fact. And they will be back for more. At some point, we have to start talking about the spending side. Now, I want to hit that a lick very fast because you've heard me talk about this before. because I want to conclude by talking a little bit about TOPS. We missed some extraordinary opportunities to control our spending. There was not a single solitary spending reform passed that I could tell. And frankly, the governor killed most of them. Let me give you some examples. You've heard me talk about contracts. Look, if you go read the Legislative Auditor's Report and the Division of Administration Report, here's what the Legislative Auditor says, because I understand the division and I disagree over contracts. The division says we only have 15,000, we're reducing. You know what? We don't know how many we have. If you go read the Legislative Auditor's Report, this is what he says. He says, as of November 2014, we had 15,000, worth $21.3 billion. Those are professional, personal, consulting, social services. So let's call it 15,000 worth $21 billion. That's what's in the database. But all the contracts aren't in the database. 7 of the 13 classes of contracts are not in the database. That's another 8,000 contracts. And on top of that, there are another 4,599, according to the legislative auditor, that are $20,000 or more that aren't in the database, worth $279 billion. Now, I add all of that up, I get 30,000 contracts. The division says it's 15,000. I don't know how they know, because it's not in the database. And the database is down, by the way. Back in November, you could go on La Track and search contracts. All of a sudden, you can't anymore. It was supposed to be fixed by April 1. Now, I understand it's going to be October. Now, I'm not saying that all these contracts are unnecessary. Every time I talk about this, somebody disagrees with me, and I'm glad to have the debate. They say, "Oh, you want to cut Medicaid? That's a contract." That's true. I've never said that. I've never said cut all the contracts. We got to have an administrator to handle our drug program, for example. Many of these contracts add value, but a lot of them don't. And we don't even know how many we have. And look, I've seen the contracts. You know, I'm not going to go into them. We can talk about contract number 717427, where they gave $552,000 to the University of Tennessee to study the effects of the Macondo oil field. I asked about that. They said they couldn't find somebody at one of our universities. We got a $1.3 million contract for after-school tutoring with New Orleans, South Africa. I've asked about that. I said, how come we can't use UNO or SUNO or Delgado? I've asked about the $64,000 contract number 703515, where they hired for $64,000 a year somebody to teach ballroom dancing at the student union. Look, I mean, I haven't ballroom danced in a while, but I think it's probably a wonderful thing to do, but it's a matter of priorities. We've got consulting contracts with God's Little Angels, a group called Little People's PlayStation, Angels in Training, the Open World Family Services, the Hip Hop Music Company. And I'm not saying the money's wasted. The truth is, we don't know. Is anybody measuring? Doing any metrics on whether taxpayers get money's worth? Is anybody asking, well, maybe could we spend some of this money for TOPS, and if it's federal money, could we run it through our universities? I'm going to give you one more example. There was a story just broke in New Orleans. Back in 2009, the Department of Health and Hospitals gave a $3 million consulting contract to a group called Alternatives Living out of New Orleans to provide help for the disabled. In 2013, the legislative auditor did an audit and said, hey, Alternatives Living owes $1.3 million in state and federal taxes, payroll taxes. I don't know whether they weren't collecting payroll taxes or whether they were collecting them and putting them in their pocket. You know what DHH did? Nothing. In 2014, Fox 8 New Orleans did a story on alternatives living. Found that they were spending a good bit of that for a $3 million fee from the state on, let's see, going to restaurants, paying the kids tuition, going to spa treatments. They went on 2 cruises. They went to the Bahamas. They went to Las Vegas. They showed up at the interview with Fox 8 in a leased Mercedes. DHH was asked about it. You know what DHH's response was? You can look it up. It was either in the Picayune or the Advocate. We think they're providing good services. The legislative auditor says, let me check Fox 8 report. The legislative auditor goes and issues a 27-page report and says, yep, Fox 8 is right. You know what DHH did? Nothing. 2 weeks ago, the federal government indicted them. We'll never get that $4 million back, folks. Never. And you say, well, that's anecdotal. That's anecdotal. Maybe. Maybe it's happening a whole bunch. But the truth of the matter is, we don't know. There's some other innovative things going on. You know, California and Ohio are investigating right now, tying the cost of their prescription drugs and their Medicaid program to the prices paid by the Veterans Administration, which is able to negotiate drug costs. I don't know if it's going to work, but it's going to save hundreds of millions of dollars. We've just expanded Medicaid. I didn't see any discussion of expanding it using consumer-driven health care. Go take a look. I mean, we're not the first group that expanded Medicaid. Go look at the Indiana health plan. I mean, they're using health savings accounts, co-pays, and premium payments with high deductible, high risk insurance to control their costs. And the Medicaid recipients are very happy and they're saving money. Look at the abuse. I want to read you an email I got on the emergency room abuse, and it does happen. President Obama's Dr. Donald Berwick, who's running CMS, testified before Congress. 10% of all the spending in Medicaid in Louisiana is fraud. It's not just fraud by the patient, it's fraud by the provider. That's just a fact. Other states are doing something about it. You go out to California. California started using, I don't completely understand it, but they use data analytics with special algorithms they designed. I'll give you an example. If I go this afternoon to Memphis and buy $10,000 worth of clothes, I'm going to get a phone call from my credit card company. They're going to say, hey, Kennedy, are you in Memphis? Did you buy clothes or did somebody steal your card? They use data analytics and special algorithms to tell things that are out of the norm. California's doing that to try to catch fraudulent claims in Medicaid before they're paid. Because they found out the old pay and chase doesn't work. If you wait and audit everybody afterwards and then say, well, they stole money, and you go to them and catch them, guess what? They don't have the money. There's so many things we could do to try to save money. And I just really think we missed a great opportunity this session to do it. And I'll give you one final example. You know, this TOPS, it'll help me segue into TOPS. At one point, we were short $183 million in the TOPS program. The House said, okay, we know we're spending, this is over a 3-year period, $20+ billion on consultants. I think that's low, but we've certainly privatized a whole lot in the last 10 years. I think that's low, but let's assume, I think most reasonable people would agree with that figure. The House said, okay, we're going to fill the TOPS hole, $183 million, by reducing the number of consulting contracts by $183 million. And it's not across the board, and we're not micromanaging, we're just telling the managers to manage and do their job. Pass the House, problem solved. That bill died in the Senate Finance Committee. Every single Democrat, every single Republican voted against it. Because the governor lobbied them, beat them like a sugar mill mule to kill that bill. And then when a bill came to the Senate to actually give them supervision over the contracts, they said, we don't want it. We don't even want the authority to say no. You can draw your own conclusions. My conclusion is that now more than ever, we've got a spending problem, folks, and we're not doing anything about it. And they raised $2.4 billion in new taxes and fees. That's a state record. It's breathtaking. It's been done in an economy that's weak as rainwater. And you know what? It's not going to solve the problem. They're going to be back for more, and as long as they don't get control of their costs, we're still going to run deficits. On TOPS, here's why I think we'll be able to fully fund TOPS in the spring. I think the House did a very wise thing by pushing the proposed cut off until the spring. I think that the TOPS was to a large extent a manufacturing crisis. I think it was. I put it up in the same category of we went through the phase where we're going to eliminate LSU football. One of the governor's lieutenants at one point said he was going to close down Nicholls State. We went through closing the kidney dialysis machines. Then we segued into, okay, now TOPS is the crisis du jour. TOPS is short. It's about 70% funded. TOPS, well, a lot of people don't realize that the program began in 1998. We've helped about 650,000 kids. It's cost us $19 billion since $1.9 billion, I'm sorry, since 1998. Since 1998, we spent $3 billion on prisons. What do you think is a better investment? In terms of funding it, here's why I think we'll find the money. First, our revenues have been improving. The bottom for this fiscal year was in December. We were down 15%. May numbers showed us only down 8%. We're still down compared to last year, but the trend's in the right direction. I'll talk about the corporation income taxes in a second. This year's budget is based on $37 oil. Right now, the budget is based on $37 oil. Next year's budget, I am told, I'm sure I'll be corrected if I'm wrong, is based on $30 oil. I don't know why the REC kept it at $30. But if you just base it on the same thing we're basing the price of oil on in this budget, you just picked up, some people say 15 million times 7. In 36 of our parishes, as a result of the flooding, our people and our small businesses got extensions to pay their taxes. That money hadn't come in yet, but it's going to be coming in. Let me say a word about corporation income taxes. Somebody announced that was accepted as gospel right before the critical tax votes, well, we're going to be short $200 million in corporation income taxes this year. A new crisis. Well, we're on an accrual because it's not going to come in by the end of the June. But we're on an accrual system, folks. We've got until 45 days after the fiscal year. The other factor you've got to consider, we went through, how many amnesties did the legislature do? 6 or 7? I don't know. We were doing one every Thursday there for a while. Okay? A lot of the reason corporate income and franchise, corporation income and franchise taxes are down is because people prepay. You can only prepay one time. At some point, those corporation income and franchise taxes are going to come back to normal, assuming we don't start doing tax amnesties again. The third factor, aside from the economy affecting corporation income and franchise taxes, is last spring when they changed the exemptions and the deductions, a lot of businesses, being rational business people, took advantage of them before they could expire. That's also a one-time thing too. The other point I would make is a lot of the bills didn't have fiscal notes. One in particular, Act 23 from the first special, had a zero fiscal note. It's brought in $7 million. I I know there's some additional money coming in. About $21 million is going to be turned over to the state in a few weeks. Our high-risk health insurance pool is going to be dissolved as a result of the Affordable Care Act. It contains $21 million. That's going to be, I alerted the leadership about this in the session. I don't think it's built into the budget. Now, right now, it's supposed to go to the mega fund. I guess if they want to spend it on the mega fund, they can, but I would rather see it spent on the TOPS program. We're going to be turning over another $2.5 million in about a few days in unclaimed property from the federal government for wrongful foreclosures. That goes into the general fund. I'm going to contribute from my budget. We're trying to figure out exactly, everybody's trying to figure out what their budget was, but as best I can tell on mine, I started here, then as a result of the mid-year reductions, I went way down here, and then I came up, and I think at the end I'm slightly ahead. And if we are, we're going to be, at Treasurer, we're going to turn back in about $300,000 to $350,000 from my budget that I don't think I'll need. That, you know, that's not, well, I think it's a lot of money, but that's out of a $10 or $11 million budget. But the real reason I think that we're going to have enough money is this. This budget forecasting is not a science, okay? I know that the governor, and I certainly respect him and his office and his opinion, said we're $600 million short. We're $600 million short. It became gospel. That's a guess, folks. That is an estimate. It could be $900 million. It could be $300 million. These $2.4 billion worth of taxes I just talked about in fees, they may bring in $3 billion. They may bring in $2.1 billion. You just don't know. But our legislative fiscal office started doing fiscal notes in a very conservative way, which I think is very prudent. And I think there's an excellent chance that we will bring in enough money to fully fund TOPS. So that's why I thought that the House did the right thing, and I truly hope that the governor won't veto what the House did, because I think he'll be hurting a lot of TOPS students and a lot of TOPS parents' deals. I've got about 10 minutes for questions. Thank you for listening to me. Let me get Julie first.
The governor said last Thursday, Treasurer, he said that Louisiana was having such a cash flow problem. This is at his midnight press conference. And I'll read you the quote. "There is every possibility that we are going to have to take out a loan to pay our regular, ordinary bills in the state of Louisiana and to deal with our cash flow problem." So I was wondering if you could talk about that for a bit. Are we going to have to take out a loan to pay the bills?
Let me explain what's going on. As you know, we have a lot of, we have the general fund, and then we have about 300 special funds that the legislature has directed me to set up. We call them statutory dedications. Money automatically flows into those funds. They don't have to compete with higher education, health care for money. We do what's called interfund borrowing. If I don't have enough money in the general fund to pay a bill, I can borrow from those statutory dedications. Now, if I borrow from a statutory dedication to pay DHH has to pay it back at the end of the fiscal year, so everything balances. When the legislature went in and reduced the amount of money in those statutory dedications, it reduced the amount of money that I have to borrow from, and that impacts cash flow. That's number one. Number two, you remember 2 years ago, at the end of the fiscal year, we're all looking at the numbers, we're going to close with a deficit, and all of a sudden the then Commissioner of Administration said, "Oops, we got a surplus." And we said, "What?" I said, "What?" They had at the division, you can call it what you want, about a $350 million, they called it a cushion. I call it a slush fund. I think had been over there forever. It was money that wasn't reported to the Revenue Estimating Conference. Through the years, I've served with 4 governors. When a governor needs to find money for something, he always can find it, or she can always find it. I always figured they got it out of this fund. But anyway, so as not to run a deficit, the Jindal administration said we're going to turn over the $300 million. So we don't have that cushion anymore. That's affected cash flow as well. And I will mention there's one other I wanted to, Medicaid Trust Fund for the elderly. The legislature spent all $800 million in it. I could borrow from that. They spend every penny. Now, I know that the Governor Jindal has gotten a lot of the blame for that, just as Governor Edwards gets a lot of the blame or credit, depending on your point of view, for what he does. But, I've never seen a governor vote on a bill. That was a legislative decision. That money's gone, so I don't have it to borrow from. So as a result, our interfund borrowing is up, and that money, under the law, has to be paid back. And that is causing the cash flow problem. I think that if the revenues come in as they expect, we'll be okay. But if we don't, we'll do what's called a revenue anticipation note, which means you basically do, probably with a private placement, you do a short-term loan. Local government does it all the time to enhance your cash flow, and then you pay it back in like 3 or 4 months. I don't consider it a big crisis. I'm not saying that it's not a good thing to have, but it was caused for the reasons I just explained. And I think one of the reasons it was talked about so much is because, once again, they're entitled to their point of view, but there are some who want to continue to say we've got a crisis and we need more taxes. More taxes, crisis, more taxes. What did Rahm Emanuel say? Never let a good crisis go to waste. And I think a lot of these crises are overstated. I understand there's another point of view, but it's clear to me, having said that, everybody's picking winners and losers. Governor Edwards won these 3 sessions. He won. The tax and spenders won. There's no question about that. Yeah.
And looking at the comparisons between the state budgets that you started your talk off with, what was the impact of the previous administration not fully funding a lot of the expenses that they had? I'm thinking about Medicaid vendor payments and that sort of thing.
Well, that's a good question.
Did you repeat your question, John?
Sure. Could you repeat it, Mark? Scream it out.
When we're taking a look at you started your speech, you take a look at the comparisons between state budgets over the years. What was the impact of the previous administration not fully funding its expenses and using the Medicaid vendor payments as an example?
Yep, did y'all hear that? I'll give you some context. Back in November, you remember Governor Jindal was still governor. We had a $200 million shortfall in the Medicaid program. The Medicaid folks said, okay, we found the $200 million. Then a few months later, we had another shortfall, and the legislature said, that $200 million you found, we're taking it. So we're right back to square one with a $200 million shortfall. That's what we're talking about. The question is, did that contribute to the new administration's problem? Short answer is yes. But let me tell you something. The bureaucracy bears some responsibility for all this too. I mean, I hear all the time the administration saying, not just Governor Edwards, but Governor Jindal did the same thing, and I guess every administration has. Well, hey, legislature, tell me what to cut. They don't have that information. The governor has control of the bureaucracy. How about the bureaucracy step up to the plate and make some suggestions? I don't ever remember around here hearing a department head standing up and saying, I got enough money and I don't need any more. Never. Now, in terms of the $200 million, I was on the conference calls with the rating agencies when the bureaucracy at DHH told the rating agencies, we can manage through that $200 million. That's what they said. Governor General leaves, Governor Edwards comes in, now all of a sudden the bureaucracy has a new story. We got a $200 million crisis. That's just a fact. And there were other people on those calls too. And you can say, well, I didn't want to tell the truth because I was scared of being fired. I don't know about all that. I just know you're supposed to tell the rating agencies the truth, and you're supposed to tell the taxpayers of Louisiana the truth. Somebody wasn't being accurate. Yeah.
John, how are the credit rating agencies going to respond to the revenue anticipation loan if we have to take it out?
I don't know. I really don't. There's not much more they can do to us. I mean, I don't know. I haven't talked to them. I think their attitude is they're concerned about Louisiana because of our budgeting practices, whether you want to call it overtaxing or whether you want to call it taxes or spending, whatever. They're concerned about that. They're concerned about the price of oil. I thought we had a good understanding with the rating agencies going back to last December, November, when Governor General was still in, that they were going to give our legislature and our new governor a chance to fix the problem. It wasn't. I don't want to mislead you. They didn't guarantee that. They didn't make a commitment or promise, but I was very hopeful. I thought we had an understanding. They pulled the trigger quicker. I think we went through a period there where there were a lot of rumors floating around that appeared in the Bond Buyer magazine, which the institutional investors read and the rating agencies read, about LSU football and about Nicholls State, and I think it spooked them. It's my personal opinion. I think we need to demonstrate some fiscal discipline for about at least a year, or probably 2 years, to be able to get our rating back.
Can you also speak to the cap on how much our bonding capability over 2 years? Because that was something that came up during the session.
Well, they loaded up the capital outlay bill. So it's that simple. Now they unloaded it a little bit, but in the waning days of the Blanco administration, that administration loaded up the capital outlay bill on the incoming Governor General. And as Governor General's going out, he loaded it up on incoming Governor Edwards. And it always puts a new governor in a tough spot. We're going to continue to have problems with capital outlay until the legislature takes back over the process. It's not right now. One person and one person only decides what gets built, and that's the governor. And it's not done in the. I'm not picking on this governor. It's true of any governor. It's done in a back room in a back room. There's no transparency. One person gets to decide, and I don't think that's what our Constitution requires, but the legislature has just given up that power. Okay, thank you.